Parshas Vaychi. This week's Parsha, Yaakov is ill, he's elderly, and he anticipates his impending death. And so he sees to the task of giving his children blessings, giving them brachos. And first he starts with Yosef. Yosef learns that his father is sick, so Yosef comes and he brings his two sons, Efrayim and Menashe. And Yaakov first starts with what seems to be a curious emphasis on Canaan. He says, Vayomer Yaakov el Yosef, this is in Perek Mem Ches, Pasuk Gimel, that's 48:3. Vayomer Yaakov el Yosef, Yaakov says to Yosef, Kel Shakai nira Elai beluz be'eretz Canaan. God, Shakai, appeared to me in Luz, in Eretz Canaan, in the land of Canaan, Vayivarach Hosi, and he blessed me. And then again, in Pasuk Zayin, verse 7, he says, Vani b'voi mi padan aram mesalai Rachel be'eretz Canaan, baderach ba'od kivas haaretz l'var frasa. And as I was coming from Padan, Rachel, my wife, Rachel, died in Eretz Canaan. What is the need to specify Eretz Canaan? Baderach ba'od kivas haaretz l'var frasa. Could have said it without emphasizing Canaan. In addition, says he quotes what God told him in Luz, Be'eretz Canaan, and he says this is now going back to Pasuk Dalet, verse 4. Vayomer Elai, he, God, said to me, I'm going to cause you to be fruitful and to multiply, and you will be for a great congregation of nations. And I will give this land to your children who follow you for an eternal inheritance. And now, but this is back to Yaakov speaking, Vata, and now, and now your two sons who were born to you in the land of Egypt, before I came to Egypt, they're mine. And this is where he says Efrayim and Menashe will be like Reuven and Shimon. In other words, he is conferring upon his two grandchildren the status of his children as far as being considered the Shivatim, the Shiftei Ka, the tribes. So there's this contrast, there's an emphasis on Eretz Canaan, and there's also a contrast with Egypt, these children who were born in Egypt. And he also makes Yosef swear not to bury Yaakov in Mitzrayim. He says, Al no sikbareinu b'Mitzrayim. Please do not bury me in Egypt, but rather, v'shachavti mavosai u'nesasani mimitzrayim. I will lie with my fathers. You will carry me out of Egypt, ukvartani b'kvorosam, and bury me in their burial place. So there's a clear, not only a contrast, but an aversion to Egypt, and an emphasis on Canaan. What is this all about? So when we look at the brachos that Yaakov gives to Efrayim and Menashe, there's the business with he crosses his hands and he actually puts his right hand on the hand of the younger one, and that's Efrayim. Why? So we talked about this last time we discussed this subject, talked about how Rabbi Kaminetsky suggests that because these two children did not grow up in a general atmosphere of sanctity of Kedusha, but rather they grew up in Egypt, in Mitzrayim, which was known for its pagan worship, its licentiousness, its denial of one single God who controls the entire universe. So there's a substantial spiritual danger that arises from being raised in a geographic location that has values that are antithetical to those of Kedusha, to those of sanctity, and to what we call today those of the Torah. So they needed special boosters. They had booster brachos, and the younger one even more than the older. The older one still had residual cultural identity, and Yaakov points to the fact that Chazal, the rabbis say that Hamelitz ben Osam, that Menashe was the interpreter. Why? Because he knew Egyptian, He was born in Egypt, but he also knew Lashon Kodesh. He also knew Hebrew, which was the language of his grandfather, and it was the Mama Lashon, the mother's tongue of Yosef before he was sold into slavery. Efrayim, on the other hand, is younger, and he is more acculturated. We see this ourselves with children who are born to, for example, to American families in Israel. The older ones tend to be much more fluent in English, and as the later born ones tend to be less fluent because of their exposure to the society. So the Yaakov is doing his best to emphasize that Mitzrayim, not our place. Our place is in the land, what we now call the land of Israel, of Canaan. So he emphasizes Luz Beretz Canaan, Mipadan to Canaan, Kivras Aretz, and don't bury me in Egypt. He's attempting to inculcate the next generation with this notion that you may be here, and you may be here for a long time, for hundreds of years, but this is not your home. Now, why is it that this bracha to these Egyptian children, or Egyptian-born children, grandchildren of Yaakov, why is this the bracha that we give to our children, and this is the bracha that Yaakov says that we will be giving to our children? In Pasuk Chaf, verse 20, the Torah says, Vayevarchem, and he blessed them. Vayom ha'u lemor, B'cha yivorech Yisrael lemor. With you shall Israel bless. And Rashi says, every man will bless his son with the following language. Lemor, as follows. Yisimcha Elokim k'Efrayim Menashe. May God make you like Ephraim and Menashe. What is it about Ephraim and Menashe? Why not, asks Chaim Keller, Zichron Bracha, why do we not give the same bracha that we give to our daughters? To our daughters, we say, Yisimech Elim Kesar Rivka Rachel V'Leah. May God make you like Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. Our foremothers. Why not? Should be like your forefathers. And Rav Keller explains, he says, he heard many times from Rav Ahron Soloveichik, who used to say a recurring drasha, recurring theme at a circumcision, at a bris milah. He used to say that all of the tribes, other than Ephraim and Menashe, grew up in Yaakov's house, in an environment of kedusha, of sanctity, of yiras shamayim, of the fear of heaven, and therefore it was easier to be on the level of Shiftei Kov, the tribes of God. But Ephraim and Menashe were raised in Egypt, which had all of these attributes which are antithetical to kedusha, and nevertheless they grew up to be righteous. They grew up to be tzaddikim, to be righteous people. And this is a unique attribute of greatness, to be able to grow up in what is essentially a spiritually hostile environment, and nevertheless to reach great heights of kedusha, of sanctity. And therefore, the blessing is that our children should, despite whatever circumstances, whatever adverse circumstances they grow up in, should be like Ephraim and Menashe, were able to overcome the hostile environment and to achieve greatness. And in fact, he quotes the Targum Yonasan, which is one of the Aramaic translations, which says, Targum Yonasan adds, extends the concepts. It's not simply a literal translation. And he says, excuse me, and he blessed them that day, saying, B'cha Yosef, B'ri Yivorchum Beis Yisrael, in you, Yosef, my son, shall the children of Israel be blessed. Yivorchum Beis Yisrael Yasinuka, they will bless their infants, B'yoma Demuhulta, on the day of their bris milah. And Chaim Keller says that Rav Ahron Soloveichik used to hear this many times from Rav Ahron. He heard it at brisin, when Rav Ahron would speak at a bris milah. And this is so fundamental bracha that it's appropriate for a bris milah, and it's one that we extend to our children every Friday night, for those who bless their children, that Yisimcha Elohim k'Ephraim and Menashe, may God make you like Ephraim and Menashe, who were able to rise above the circumstances of their birth, rise above the circumstances of their environment in which they grew up and achieve greatness. And that is the bracha for Klal Yisrael, wherever they are, that they have the inner strength and the connection to the Mesorah, to the tradition, and to the land. We don't belong in Mitzrayim, wherever that Mitzrayim is. We belong in Canaan. That's where our forefathers are. That's where our destiny is. And no matter where we are called upon to rise above our circumstances and to live our lives as holy Jews who are, at least in our hearts, in the land of Israel. Have a good Shabbos.